The year is 1520, and you, a stunning captive from the Caucasus, have just been chosen for the imperial palace of Istanbul. As you walk through the vast marble halls of the Topkapi Palace, the soft silk of your slippers glides over the polished floors, soundless, as if to remind you that your every step here is both a privilege and a cage. Beside you walks an elderly woman, her robes heavy with intricate embroidery, her gaze sharp despite the years. She leans in, whispering something urgent into your earwords that will decide whether you survive in this glittering world or fade into the shadows, forgotten. These are not mere traditions or polite courtesies of the palace. What this woman is about to tell you is the invisible chain that will bind you for the rest of your days in the Sultan's harem. These rules are not open to negotiation. They are laws, enforced by a strict hierarchy of women who wield absolute power over hundreds of women, all vying for favor, and perhaps a chance to influence the ruler. The first rule you must learn is perhaps the cruelest of them all. No concubine, no matter how beloved by the Sultan or adored for her beauty, is ever allowed to spend the night with him. It doesn't matter if the Sultan adores her. Once the night falls and his eyes close, she must leave quietly, without a sound, gathering her things in darkness and retreating to her assigned quarters. The palace guards are ever watchful. If a woman is found in the Sultan's chambers by morning, there is no forgiveness. It is not just a breach of etiquette, it is an offense punishable by death. This rule, sacred for generations, is not about comfort or passion. It is a calculated effort to prevent any woman from forming emotional bonds with the Sultan, from having a hand in his decisions, or from affecting the balance of power within the empire. It is a strategy designed for control, a way to ensure that the Sultan's heart, as distant as his mind, never grows close to any of the women who serve him. But everything changes with Hürrem Sultan, a fierce and ambitious Ukrainian woman who breaks this law in a single, daring act. In 1520, Hürrem spends her first night in the Sultan's chambers, defying the most sacred rule of the harem. When the morning light breaks through the lattice windows, Hürrem is still there. This bold move should have meant her death, but instead, it marks the beginning of her rise to power. The reaction within the harem is nothing short of volcanic. Senior concubines, who had adhered to this rule for years, watch in stunned silence as Hürrem's defiance shakes the very foundation of the Sultan's court. Little do they know, this single act will change the balance of power in the Ottoman Empire forever. The very fabric of the Sultan's authority within the harem was shattered by a woman who transformed an act of rebellion in the bedroom into an act of political revolution. Hürrem Sultan, bold and cunning, defied the rules of intimacy in the palace, challenged the women in charge of the harem, would not take lightly. Palace records recount the turmoil that followed Hürrem's defiance, as established concubines demanded her immediate execution, fearing the collapse of their own positions. Meanwhile, younger women whispered in corners, wondering whether the sacred law still held power or if it had finally been broken. The second rule of the harem's intimate life, known as the one concubine, one son-law, carried far-reaching consequences beyond simple matters of reproduction. Under this law, once a concubine bore a male heir, her relationship with the Sultan was officially severed. She was swiftly removed from the Sultan's private quarters, relocated to more distant apartments within the sprawling palace, where her life of romantic entanglement was over. Her new role was clear. She would become a mother of princes, wielding political influence rather than remaining a lover. This law created a twisted dynamic in which pregnancy with a son, though it guaranteed the future of the empire, was both a triumph and a form of romantic death. For these women, bearing a son meant not only the possibility of immense political power, but also the end of the intimacy that had originally made them the Sultan's favorites. Concubines who gave birth to sons were given large, luxurious apartments, furnished with exquisite silk-covered cushions and adorned with elaborate tiles. They were granted financial support and attendance to raise their royal children, but the price was steep. Their lives would no longer be entwined with the Sultan's. Conversely, those who bore daughters could maintain their close proximity to the Sultan. They remained in the Sultan's favor and were able to continue vying for his attention, living with the anxiety that their next pregnancy could produce the son who would sever their connection to him forever. Palace records detail the extreme lengths to which these women would go to delay or prevent pregnancy using herbs, timing methods, and other means to control their bodies, turning them into battlegrounds of desire and strategic calculation. Access to the Sultan's private chambers was tightly controlled. and before any woman could enter, she was subjected to humiliating and invasive examinations. These purity tests, as they were euphemistically called, went far beyond what we would consider a medical procedure. The physical requirements were so exacting and specific that they bordered on the bizarre, subjecting the women to dehumanizing scrutiny. The control over every aspect of these women's bodies and lives was a constant reminder of the empire's power and the rules they were forced to obey, rules that ensured their survival, but also ensured that they could never escape the sultan's grasp. Palace records detail a chilling set of criteria by which women were selected for the sultan's private quarters. These were not simple matters of beauty or charm. The women were subjected to bizarre and invasive evaluations. Their anatomical proportions, their breathing patterns as they slept, and even the likelihood of snoring or speaking in their sleep were all carefully scrutinized. Any disruption to the sultan's rest, no matter how small, was unacceptable. Women who exhibited any signs of sleep disturbance were promptly disqualified from bedroom service and reassigned to menial tasks. Elsewhere in the palace, one of the most grotesque chapters in the history of harem recruitment unfolded during the reign of Sultan Ibrahim in the 1640s. Known for his eccentric obsessions, Ibrahim's reign saw the implementation of recruitment practices that were as strange as they were disturbing. After becoming fixated on the anatomy of a cow during a hunting trip, he ordered golden replicas to be made, each representing his unusual standards of physical proportions. These golden models were distributed throughout the empire with a directive for provincial governors to find women who matched these exact specifications. What followed was an imperial recruitment campaign that became infamous in Ottoman history. Agents of the Sultan traveled to distant corners of the empire, carrying the golden replicas with them. They conducted examinations that reduced women to mere anatomical measurements, a humiliating process that objectified them to an extent rarely seen in human history. The woman who eventually met Ibrahim's bizarre criteria was a 330-pound Armenian woman named Maria, who was renamed Shivakar and brought into the imperial harem, where she was granted a position of honor. Sultan Ibrahim's reign also introduced a strange fetish that would forever alter the palace's design: the fur obsession. Ibrahim believed that the pelts of animals could enhance his sexual prowess, so he ordered furs from across the empire to be placed in every room where he might engage in intimate affairs. The palace was transformed into a grotesque menagerie, with Persian carpets replaced by wolf pelts and silk wall hangings covered with bear skins. The very architecture of the Sultan's chambers became a testament to his strange desires, reflecting his need to surround himself with symbols of dominance and power. The complexity of bedroom access under Ibrahim's rule was matched only by the meticulousness of the scheduling system that governed it. The palace treasurer kept detailed diaries, recording every intimate encounter with military-like precision. Dates, participants, and even outcomes were documented in bureaucratic detail, much like the work of modern accountants. These records, however, served more than a mere administrative function. They were a way to prevent conflicts between concubines by ensuring each woman knew exactly when she would have access to the Sultan's chambers. Weeks in advance, women were assigned their specific nights, creating a rigid calendar of intimacy that stripped away any spontaneity from imperial sexuality. These records also played a vital role in establishing legal paternity for children born from these encounters, ensuring that succession disputes could be settled through paperwork rather than bloodshed. Violating the sacred scheduling system, however, was a grave offense, one with deadly consequences. Palace records tell of Gulf Khaden, one of Sultan Suleiman's wives, who was executed for the crime of selling her scheduled night to another concubine. This transaction revealed how valuable bedroom access had become within the harem economy, and the punishment she faced demonstrated that imperial intimacy was not personal, it was state property, to be used only as the Sultan saw fit. The design of the Sultan's private chambers only furthered the system of control that governed the harem. These spaces were crafted with a dual purpose in mind: to facilitate intimacy while maintaining constant surveillance. Privacy, in these rooms, was an illusion granted only at the Sultan's discretion, and only when he deemed it appropriate. The architecture itself became part of the system of power and control that dictated every aspect of life within the palace. Hidden passages quietly connected the Sultan's private chambers to carefully positioned observation rooms, where trusted eunuchs could watch intimate encounters without being seen. These secret spaces allowed the palace to maintain constant surveillance, ensuring that even the most personal moments were subject to imperial oversight. The design of the chambers themselves was as strategic as it was luxurious. Every detail, from the placement of windows to the arrangement of furniture, was calculated to allow guards a clear line of sight into the Sultan's bedchamber. The windows were angled perfectly, permitting observation from outside, yet preserving the illusion of privacy within. The exquisite tiles adorning the walls of these rooms were not just decorative, but functional. Their reflective surfaces doubled as subtle mirrors, aiding in covert surveillance, making it easier for palace administrators to monitor every aspect of life behind closed doors. The management of bedroom access was meticulously scheduled, with the precision of military logistics. At the heart of this system was the Valid Sultan, the woman who oversaw every detail of the harem's daily life. She maintained detailed charts, recording each concubine's menstrual cycles, pregnancy status, and availability for intimate encounters. These records, preserved in the Ottoman archives, reveal a level of biological surveillance that treated the women's bodies as resources tools to be controlled and optimized for the empire's needs. Every month, the Valid Sultan would preside over elaborate ceremonies where the upcoming rotation of concubines was announced. The women were informed of their designated nights through a complex system of colored silk handkerchiefs. A gold-threaded handkerchief meant immediate access to the Sultan's bedchamber, while a white one signaled a fall from favor, meaning the woman might never be chosen again. The psychological weight of this system was designed to break the spirit. For weeks leading up to their assigned nights, the concubines underwent harsh beauty rituals. Palace records tell of women using lead-based cosmetics, slowly poisoning their skin, enduring painful procedures to maintain their youthful appearances, and following extreme diets that often left them fainting during intimate encounters. These rituals were more than mere preparation. They were performances of submission, an intense physical and psychological process that began days before the actual encounter. Once selected, the concubines were isolated in special rooms, where teams of servants bathed them in fragrant waters, massaged their bodies with oils believed to have aphrodisiac properties, and dressed them in garments designed for easy removal. The clothing worn during these encounters was never reused. It was either discarded or carefully preserved as evidence of the imperial act that had occurred. The journey to the Sultan's chambers was a ritual that emphasized the concubines' absolute powerlessness. Escorting them was a eunuch, guiding them through predetermined paths that intentionally bypassed areas where other women in the harem might see them. This was to prevent jealousy, maintaining the illusion that every encounter with the Sultan was unique and special, set apart from the others. Symbolically, the path itself told a story. It began in the communal quarters where concubines lived as little more than prisoners, and led to the isolated and luxurious world of the Sultan's intimate chambers. Upon entering, the concubines were met with a series of ritualistic behaviors perfected over centuries of imperial tradition. They were required to approach the Sultan's bed from a specific angle, always facing him, never turning their backs. This positioning wasn't about respect, it was about control, designed to prevent any possibility of hidden weapons or surprise attacks. In the world of the Ottoman Empire, even sexual encounters were viewed as potential threats to the Sultan's life. The silence rule that governed these intimate moments turned each encounter into a performance of suppressed humanity. The women were forbidden from speaking unless directly commanded, unable to express pleasure, pain, or any emotional response that might suggest they were experiencing the encounter as something personal. Every action, every feeling, had to be concealed under a facade of serene submission. Palace training went to great lengths, teaching techniques to control their breathing, suppress natural responses, and maintain an expressionless face, regardless of the physical sensations they might experience. The aftermath of these encounters was no less dehumanizing. Concubines were immediately removed from the bedchamber by waiting eunuchs and subjected to medical examinations to detect any signs of pregnancy. These examinations took place within hours of the encounter, reducing the women's bodies to mere vessels for the potential future heirs of the empire. Not acknowledging their humanity or emotional state after the experience, the documentation of these intimate moments was astonishing in its detail, far more intricate than any modern bureaucracy would dare to record. Palace scribes meticulously noted not only the dates and participants, but also specifics about the duration, positions, and the sultan's apparent satisfaction. These records were used for legal purposes, establishing paternity and succession, but they also created a database that influenced future concubine selection and training, ensuring that the sultan's preferences were always taken into account. Perhaps the most psychologically devastating aspect of this system was the way it turned natural human emotions into vulnerabilities that could end in death or exile. Any concubine who showed signs of genuine affection for the sultan was immediately flagged as a security threat and removed from the rotation. Affection, the most natural of human feelings, became a dangerous weakness in the harem, a weakness that could cost a woman everything. Love, in the harem, was considered a form of treason, an emotion that threatened the very fabric of imperial control. If a concubine allowed herself to form emotional bonds, it meant she might prioritize her feelings over the empire's interests, which was unacceptable. To ensure absolute compliance, a network of surveillance and betrayal was woven into the daily lives of the women. Senior concubines were tasked with reporting any violations committed by younger arrivals, while the newcomers were encouraged to expose the infractions of established favorites. This system deliberately fostered an atmosphere of mistrust and competition, ensuring that no group of women could ever form a collective resistance to the sultan's control. Every woman was a potential threat to another's position, and the constant monitoring of relationships ensured that loyalty to the empire would always come first. The seasonal nature of the sultan's preferences added yet another layer of complexity to the harem's intricate dynamics. Ottoman records revealed that the sultan's desires often followed a seasonal rhythm. He had particular preferences for certain types of women during specific months, festivals, or occasions. These patterns were meticulously tracked by palace administrators, who adapted their recruitment and training programs to ensure that the right women would be available when the sultan's desires shifted with the changing seasons. This system transformed the harem into a shadow economy, where influence, information, and even intimate opportunities could be bought, sold, and traded. Women who had fallen out of favor might resort to selling their personal belongings, clothing, and other valuables to maintain their positions in the sultan's intimate schedule. Others wielded their designated knights with strategic cunning, using their access to the sultan as leverage in the high-stakes politics of the palace. The complex and often ruthless economy of bedroom access reflected the hierarchical, transactional nature of life in the harem. The training required for a concubine to serve the sultan was an exhaustive and dehumanizing process that stripped away her individuality. New arrivals faced 2 years of intense conditioning, designed to break them down and rebuild them as flawless instruments of imperial pleasure. This curriculum was far from simple. It included lessons in 17 different languages, poetry, recitation, musical performance on traditional instruments, and, in a euphemistic tone, the intimate arts. The intimate arts were taught by seasoned concubines, who had spent decades within the system and knew exactly what was required to please the sultan. These women, who had survived years in the harem, became the instructors, passing down the techniques necessary to read the sultan's mood through subtle facial expressions, adjust physical responses to his preferences, and maintain the illusion of deep, passionate devotion while suppressing any genuine emotion. The training was so thorough that, upon graduation, the concubines could simulate any emotional state on command. They became expert performers, turning what should have been a natural human experience into a carefully orchestrated, theatrical performance for the sultan's satisfaction. At the end of this grueling program came the final tester, terrifying and intimate examination. Each candidate was required to demonstrate her skills in a simulated encounter before a panel of senior harem officials. The session was brutally detailed, with the women critiqued on their technique, emotional presentation, and ability to maintain the proper level of submission throughout the performance. For these women, the line between real and performed passion had long since disappeared. Women who failed the rigorous examination were condemned to a lifetime of menial labor, forever stripped of any chance of rejoining the sultan's bed. Those who passed, however, entered a ruthless system where their fate was determined by the sultan's whims. The control over the concubines extended far beyond the bedroom, reaching into even their most basic biological functions. Palace physicians crafted intricate meal plans, designed to either enhance fertility at specific times or prevent pregnancy when it suited the empire's needs. These dietary restrictions ensured that the women's bodies were finely tuned instruments, responding not to their own needs but to the demands of the sultan's desires and the political strategies of the court. Certain foods were strictly prohibited if they affected a concubine's scent, taste, or physical performance. Every aspect of their bodies was controlled, and the women were conditioned to view their physicality as a tool for the empire's pleasure rather than their own. Beauty maintenance requirements became increasingly extreme, often resulting in permanent damage to the women's health. Palace records described the use of mercury-based cosmetics that made the concubine's skin appear luminous, yet slowly poisoned their nervous systems. Other women underwent torturous procedures to lighten their skin, remove body hair with caustic substances, or alter their figures to match the ever-changing preferences of the sultan. What began as a pursuit of beauty became a form of slow destruction. The concubines sacrificed their health, and often their sanity, to retain their positions within the harem. The extreme measures they underwent to maintain beauty were, in essence, a kind of suicide and agonizing destruction of themselves for the sake of imperial desire. The regulations governing what the concubines wore to intimate encounters were no less controlling. The garments served as more than just aesthetic choices. They were symbols of power and status. The color of a concubine's attire signified her rank within the harem, and the jewelry she wore indicated her position within the sultan's inner circle. The most favored concubines wore elaborate silks imported from China, their bodies adorned with gold jewelry crafted by the finest Ottoman artisans. In contrast, lower-ranking women wore simpler fabrics, which marked them as less important in the sultan's eyes. The ritual of undressing followed strict, choreographed patterns passed down through generations of concubines. Every movement, every piece of clothing removed, was part of a performance designed to maximize visual appeal while demonstrating complete submission to imperial authority. The undressing sequence was timed to fit perfectly within the intimate encounter, ensuring that sexuality was treated as a ceremonial duty, a performance, rather than a natural, human experience. Each moment in the sultan's chambers was a meticulously orchestrated act, designed to maintain control and reinforce the power dynamics of the empire. These rules were not relics of a distant, forgotten era. For over 6 centuries, they shaped the intimate lives of countless women in the Ottoman Empire, continuing until its collapse in 1922. The psychological chains forged within the marble walls of the harem created a system of control that reduced human sexuality to a mere instrument of state policy, where love was seen as treason and intimacy was nothing more than a performance. The archives of the empire still hold these records, a silent testament to how easily power can corrupt the most intimate aspects of the human experience, reducing love, affection, and humanity to nothing more than tools of dominance.